balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. Episode number 58, Just Lori. I received this email a few months ago. It said, "Hello, my name is Autumn, and I am an ASU student. I'm a breastfeeding college mom who was recently assigned a persuasive speech topic. I was able to pick what I wanted, so I decided to choose something I'm personally struggling with now, which is being shamed for public breastfeeding without a cover. Would you be up for helping me with an interview on why we should normalize breastfeeding instead of making it something to do in a private manner? I feel awful that Autumn or anyone else who has been shamed for public breastfeeding without a cover. I know that I am very much into the world of breastfeeding mothers, and so it's easy for me to say that I just don't get it. But honestly, I just don't get it. Gosh, no matter what anyone's personal opinion is, the primary purpose of our breasts is to feed our babies, is to keep our babies alive through the nourishment and hydration we offer, and the primary way our babies grow and thrive from newborn to infant to toddler. Our human milk is meant for our human babies, and plain and simple, and for untold amount of years, it has been a matter of survival. The bigger issue is, and what I really don't understand, is putting aside that for some people who don't want to see a mom breastfeeding her baby, there's an incredibly easy solution. So simple, it amazes me why this is such an issue. It is such an easy thing for someone who does not like seeing this to do what? Just look the other way. I mean, why are others staring at a mother's chest anyway? You just cannot convince me that to look away is such a hardship. For parents who have kids and they don't want their kids seeing a mom breastfeed in public, do whatever else you would do when there's anything else in public you don't want them to be staring at. I know when my kids were little, they would stare at whatever was different. For the most part, I think they were trying to understand or were just plain old curious about that person in a wheelchair, or that guy with this huge walking cane, or the person with the spiked purple hair. Perhaps you come across someone in front of you in the mall who you can see the whole butt cheeks hanging out, or you pass by a lingerie store that has mannequins that look so real and they're naked or have lacy bras, and your kids are staring at it and pointing and saying, "What's that, Mommy?" Well, what do you do then when you don't want them seeing these kinds of things? Well, whatever it is you do the same thing when you come across a mom who's breastfeeding her baby. As for expecting the breastfeeding mother to move, her first and primary concern is her baby and her children. Her baby is hungry. She is going to avoid her baby getting to the point of high-pitched crying and sweating, and just feed her baby, wherever she may be. For anyone who has kids, you know it is much more difficult and extremely inconvenient for a mom to pack up all her stuff and perhaps gather her other kids and try and find a clean and private place to sit and breastfeed her baby than it is for the person who is uncomfortably looking at it to just not look. And don't even get me started when I hear people say they just cannot pick themselves up and leave, that it's inconvenient for them. Well, then you still have several alternatives. You just don't look her way. It's like the easiest, most simplest solution ever. And if you can't do that, then the next easiest thing to do is for you to make sure that you never leave home without a blanket, so when you encounter a breastfeeding mother, you can cover your head with it and keep it there until the mom is done. As long as you always bring your cover, you'll never have to worry. This way, you don't have to see anything and your problem's solved. Also, need I remind you, a mother who is breastfeeding in public is doing something that is legal and the most normal thing in the world to do. She should not be inconvenienced just because someone does not like what they see. I go out in public all the time and I see all kinds of things that I may not want to see. Some of them are other body parts that I really don't feel like seeing. But when this happens to me, I just make a conscious decision to look the other way, walk around them, problem solved. As a lactation consultant, I hear these stories all the time of public shaming. Moms have been told to leave public places, they've been told to go to the bathrooms to feed their baby, they've been told to cover up, they've been given blankets to cover up, they've been kicked out of public pools, museums, and the list just goes on and on. So when Autumn asked me to answer a few questions for her, I was happy to do so. Let's go over some of the questions she had for me. Her first question was, how often do women decide to not breastfeed because of fear from social views or lack of support? Well, the breastfeeding initiation rate, according to the CDC across the United States, is about 85 to 90%, which means that, let's just say, 85 out of every 100 mothers are starting out new motherhood consciously deciding that they are choosing to breastfeed. While there are a certain number of mothers who are not able to breastfeed because of specific health issues, this is probably less than 5% of the population. While I don't have exact numbers to give you in answer to that, all the statistics I just shared really lead me to believe that the number of women who decide not to breastfeed because of fear from social views or lack of support is very, 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 very low. The next question, number 2. How often do you feel women give up breastfeeding because of public feeding shaming? I think this number is very, very, very low. Mothers who are breastfeeding and are out in public, they feel pretty comfortable doing so, and they've probably been breastfeeding their baby for several weeks in the privacy of their own home, and breastfeeding may be going very well for them, and they take their baby out in public and have a feeding. If someone shames them, if breastfeeding has been going pretty well, I just don't think that's enough to make them give up on breastfeeding. I also just finished watching a great presentation in the Gold Online Conference with Diana Cassidy, who's an IBCLC, and during her talk she referenced a study that she read during her research. I believe it was in the Journal of Nursing, but I'd be happy to get that info for anyone who contacts me. This is what the research showed. Studies showed that 90% of mothers who stopped breastfeeding in the first 6 weeks would have preferred to breastfeed longer. They get discouraged as they realize in the early days that breastfeeding is not as easy or natural as they thought it would be. They get discouraged and confused because of much conflicting information between what they were told before their baby was born, the information they received during their first few days postpartum, and the information they received from their doctors or midwives or pediatricians, as well as friends and family members. They stop breastfeeding because they're in pain, or they suffer with milk production or baby weight gain issues, and they feel like others do not understand what they're going through and cannot find the help they need. And this really tells us that moms are not giving up on breastfeeding because of public shaming. In fact, in many of the studies that I've read, I don't even see that being mentioned. So this info really totally supports my quick response to the question, if I feel women give up breastfeeding because of public shaming. On the opposite end of the spectrum, what I've really found in my own private practice and working with thousands of women is that when breastfeeding is going really well and they feel supported and happy, hardly anything is going to get in their way of breastfeeding their baby for as long as they mutually desire. Third question: how do you feel women would be positively affected if breastfeeding was more publicly accepted? Well, I don't think that the issue with breastfeeding in public caused most mothers to decide against breastfeeding to begin with, or cause them to wean. It does make it more uncomfortable and more inconvenient for them if they have to have those concerns of being shamed in public. Having nursing in public be more the norm and widely accepted will make it easier and more convenient for mothers. This would decrease some of the habits that mothers have of rushing home when their baby needs to eat, or going to the car when their baby needs to eat, or just feeling anxious about finding a private place to breastfeed their baby. This would also decrease their self-imposed need to pump ahead of time in order to get milk to give in a bottle when they are on the outside. Having public breastfeeding be the norm would encourage mothers to not be so isolated in their homes in the early days of breastfeeding, for fear their baby will need to feed on the outside. Do all breastfed children drink out of bottles? That was question number 4. No, not all breastfed babies drink out of bottles, and this is one of the things that moms who may have a concern about going in public, this is one of the things that keeps them home longer, because they're not pumping and they're not giving their babies milk in a bottle, and that's their choice. There's a small but significant percent of babies who have just never had a bottle. Some of the babies exclusively breastfeed up until the time they could transition to using a cup. There are certainly enough moms like myself whose babies never drank out of a bottle. I have 3 children and breastfed each one well over their first year or 2 and 3, and they did not have a bottle. At a certain point, and the timeline is different for each one, they transition to a cup. Here goes Autumn's 5th question. Can all women pump appropriate amounts of milk for their children? Not all women can pump enough milk for their babies, and this does not necessarily mean that they're not producing enough milk for their babies, as this is often the case in that their babies are well-fed babies, they're making totally enough, and yet they just don't get the volume of milk from pumping. Mom's totally making enough milk for their babies, and their babies are gaining perfectly from exclusive breastfeeding. But some moms just do not do well with the pumps. They just don't let down easily, or the pumps hurt them. When moms are not getting enough milk from the pump, and we have ruled out any issues with the pump being the cause, I then will usually suggest 2 options if they need to have milk available for their baby. The first one is to try using a hospital-grade pump. It just seems to be that the comfort of a hospital-grade pump and the motor and the cycling speed and rhythm tends to make it more comfortable for mothers, which in turn tends to make them be able to relax more, which in turn allows them to extract more milk. The other option is to hand express. We've lost the art of hand expression with the so easy to get pumps now for moms, but hand expression can work really well, be just as quick, and you get better volume for some moms. So I talk to them and show them how to hand express. Question number 6, will all children breastfeed under a cover? I love this question. Has anybody been around a breastfeeding mom who's used a cover? And certainly some of the babies are fine with it, but the ones that aren't, it's kind of funny. So no, not all babies who will breastfeed under a cover. There are those who will and those that don't. But it's the funniest thing when the moms are trying to keep the cover on and the babies pop on and off the breast. They pop on and off they keep pulling the covers up. Moms are pulling the covers down. The babies are pulling the covers up with their hands, or they're popping out with their cute little faces. And I think it can be very inconvenient for some mothers. In addition, some moms just cannot coordinate using the blanket and latching their babies on. It could also be extremely too hot for both the mom and baby. Number 7, Is the sexualization of breasts the major issue with public breastfeeding? I don't know. Most people would agree that this is the major issue with public breastfeeding, but I feel that while this is a part of it, it's more about the lack of understanding about how the whole breastfeeding thing works, how the breasts make milk, how the babies get their milk, how frequently they feed, what is normal for newborn feedings, the act of supply and demand, and many other things that are also, they just cause people to have issues with public breastfeeding, is just not knowing how the whole thing works. For instance, there are many people who have issues with public breastfeeding, and it could be women. I hear enough women who say that they're not comfortable seeing other women breastfeed. The other thing is, let's say you're a mom or a dad or a grandparent, and now you're living with a new mom. Let's just say you're hanging out with her. You get to see firsthand just how frequently babies feed. If you've never had an opportunity to be in a household up close and personal where there's a breastfeeding mom and baby, you get to see full breasts and experience what happens to the breast and the baby when feedings are prolonged. There are many other examples that I can cite. However, the point is, I've learned that once others have a good understanding of breastfeeding 101, they just naturally realize that they have a different viewpoint about mothers' needs to nurse in public, and their whatever uncomfortableness they had just kind of goes by the wayside. They understand that exclusively breastfed babies don't just all of a sudden take a bottle because their mom is on the outside. They know what it's like to hear a hungry baby cry and cry and cry. They understand the emotional feelings that mothers have when their babies are crying. They understand why a mom might not want to be pumping and why a mom might not want to introduce a bottle. They understand hungry babies and bursting boobs just can't wait. They begin to get it, and they stop thinking of it as a sexual thing only. So I think education is key. Number 8, how would you suggest making men more comfortable with seeing a woman breastfeed? Well, I think education is the key. Growing up in households where breastfeeding is the norm, as with any other things in life, education begins at home. Parents understanding how it all works and being able to explain it to their kids in an age-appropriate way and not making a big deal about it. And we just can't make men more comfortable. Some men are the breast is sexual to them. Most men it is. It's just a fact of life. But they can also take a look at a breast and a breastfeeding mother and a newborn in another way. They don't have to have tunnel vision. It helps if they're around it when they're young, and it's just not a big deal. Then they have to understand the science behind it all, and this goes a long way. Number 9, last question. If people were more educated about breastfeeding, would it help more people accept breastfeeding? Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. My own experience in working with parents and grandparents and siblings. Light bulbs go off once they learn a few key things, and from there, it changes from ew or yuck or a sexual thing to, oh, this is what babies need kind of a thing, and this is what mommies do. Basically, I think we need to move away from trying to make others feel comfortable with seeing mothers feed their baby in public. More women just need to do it, despite what others think. The more we see it, the more it will be accepted. The more it's accepted, the more mothers will do it. Pretty soon, it will just be normal. It is legal for mothers to nurse their babies wherever they are allowed to be, but just because it's legal doesn't fool us. It doesn't mean that mothers will never be shamed or kicked out or told to go feed their baby elsewhere. There will always be the people who are ignorant of the law or decide that they're above the law. So, we need to teach them what the law is and stay put. Just think, if every day when you went out in public and you saw, let's say, 10 mothers breastfeeding their babies, while you were waiting in line at Target, sitting in a chair at the library, at a table at a fast food place, a restaurant, a car wash, sitting in a park, on a college campus, all the usual places we visit each day, And let's just say this happened every day. If your only exposure to mother's breastfeeding in public happened once every few months, or if you had never seen this before, but now, in a whole month, you've just been seeing this many times a day, I bet you anything, a month later, you probably would not be thinking twice about it. You might have a personal opinion about it, however, you would not think it was odd or unusual something to see. You would not be looking to turn that mother into the store owner. You would probably not complain to the restaurant owner and threaten to not eat there anymore. It does not appear to me that people are uncomfortable seeing other women walking around public scantily dressed, braless, and you can see their nipples popping out from behind their shirts. And even though it's at the beach, there are still women walking around with much of their breasts and butts exposed. I see the same people who are uncomfortable seeing women breastfeed in a mall, but they're totally fine going to the beach and seeing even much more exposure. It should not matter where they see it. If they're uncomfortable, then they're uncomfortable, and would purposely avoid going to places and taking their family where they see lots of breast tissue uncovered. But many don't. In fact, they purposely take their family and go to the beaches and public pools. So, the way I see it, I don't understand the complaints about people not wanting to see that in a public place, but they are seemingly fine to purposely choose to go to public pools and beaches where they definitely see a whole lot more than just a breastfeeding mother. They are exposed to skin, a lot of it, the whole time they are there, and because they're surrounded by it, they can't look away. So let's contemplate that for a few moments. I also wanted to add that this whole thing about breastfeeding in public and shaming mothers is quite recent. You can take a look at the show notes and you'll find links that I have put there with many images of women in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s, all nursing their babies in public places with men and women sitting right next to them as if it's the most normal thing in the world to do. And it was. Somehow, we have taken many steps backwards in the last 50 years or so. It is time to get back to where we were and leave breastfeeding moms alone, for goodness sake. I hope articles like the one Autumn is writing and shows like this one, All About Breastfeeding podcast, help us to get back to the way things should be. A world where breastfeeding is normalized, and a world where we don't have to put up signs to let moms know that she and her breastfed baby are welcomed in that establishment, or where hospitals don't have to work so hard and spend so much money to become baby friendly. Do you know that hospitals spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to become baby friendly? You didn't know about that, huh? Well, that is for another show. I'm going to leave on this note with a couple of quotes. If my breastfeeding offends you, put a cover over your head. If you are offended by my breastfeeding, you've been staring too long. I will see you on the next show. Before I end, I have 3 topics I would like to end this show with. The first item is, I love getting email and reviews from you, my listeners. The next best thing for me to do would be able to get to talk to some of my listeners and hear your feedback about the show. What are you liking? What do you want more of? Your thoughts on what I can do to make the show better, and any additional thoughts you have. If talking to me is something you would like to do, just go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/contact. Fill out the form and just put the word feedback in the comments section, and I will send you an email so we can work out a time to chat. The second item is an offer to pregnant moms. There's no reason for you to have unanswered worries or concerns about breastfeeding. Many have said that you would have liked to have the opportunity to talk to me before your baby was born, so you could go over certain things that may have been troubling you about breastfeeding. Questions about maybe your health, medication you're taking, maybe breast surgery you had, your nipple anatomy, Perhaps you have fears or anxiety about breastfeeding and you feel it would be helpful to talk it out before your baby's born. Some mothers just have a bunch of questions that could not be answered in your regular breastfeeding class because of time or privacy. Talking through things can help you clear the way emotionally for an excellent start with breastfeeding. If you would like to Skype me, all you need to do is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype to schedule your online prenatal consult. The third and last item is a reminder about my fabulous online breastfeeding mothers group for you to join. We are meeting for 8 Wednesdays starting May 11th. There is only room for 10 moms, so if you want to join, check out allaboutbreastfeeding.biz support for details about the group, what we're doing, and the dates, and how you can get involved. Until the next show, this is Lori saying goodbye.